and Dustin comes in rocking it, man.
Yes.
New walk-up music for the man. How was your weekend?
Good, man. Good. Not super. Didn't do anything that stands out. Just good relaxing Saturday. Good relaxing Sunday. So.
The Pacers schedule out. More national TV time.
Significant. Yeah. I mean, I think you knew that was going to happen after they made the Eastern Conference Finals. Not part of the big events, like opening day or Christmas or anything like that, but I think it's 9 games on either ESPN or TNT, 5 more on NBA TV. They'll be first. They got 2 in the first 5 games. They'll play, obviously, playoff rematches against the Knicks and the Celtics, the 25th on ESPN and the 30th also on ESPN. Got a couple other that are streamed out. I got a couple, I think, against Cleveland. Got to pull this up to make sure I know what I'm talking about. I think their opener, their Milwaukee game in the in-season tournament, obviously another, that also being a rematch, is a national TV game. It very clearly can see that there's the league can see that there are some benefits to having the Pacers on TV, and that this team's a fun team to have on television. Yeah. There's enough storylines, obviously, just coming off of the way those playoff series went. I mean, they obviously like interesting series, certainly against Milwaukee and New York in particular. Have some level of bad blood is not how far I would take it, but there's some rivalry brewing with the Bucks, and so getting them on TV together, I think, is a wise move. So those 3 are all national TV games inside of the first, inside of October and November. Obviously got the games in against San Antonio in Paris. They get to go play Wemby there, so that should be interesting. But Cleveland, New York, Milwaukee in the second half of the season. TNT, two TNT games against Cleveland. One against Milwaukee, one against and one against the Knicks on February 11th. They a lot of ways to make sure they get attention. They certainly can end up with more if they end up in the in-season tournament knockout round, as they did last year. Last year, they only had one national TV game scheduled when the season began, but obviously earned 3 more by virtue of reaching the in-season tournament final. Certainly, there's more opportunities if they get back to Vegas. Interesting schedule the way it shakes out. You can tell that there's a difference in travel when they're trying to get you on TV because there were, I think, there are a couple road trips that do make geographical sense, but some where they're really bouncing around, which is sort of interesting. It's not like, do an East Coast trip and a West Coast trip. It's very clearly designed differently. It shakes out differently. It seems to be to make sure that they get on television. Seems to be the case. So making sure some of those marquee games fit themselves in some different windows, and they have some road trips that don't necessarily, that would usually fit in that don't. For instance, they would usually face Denver, along with their as part of a longer road trip, and there isn't one in there. They have a 1-game trip out to Denver, which is kind of strange. It's definitely a different schedule, but a sign that people care about the Pacers a little bit more now. Obviously, they're not the most televised team by any means. And I think every team that they've played in the playoffs is probably getting more TV time than they do. But there's still a recognition that they are, an Eastern Conference contender.
Yeah, Milwaukee, that came to mind quickly because Indiana, was they 4-1 against them last year in the regular season?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, and Milwaukee expected to be a team that was competing for the NBA championship last year. So that got a lot of people's attention very quickly.
Sure. Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, even before, they beat them in the semifinals of the in-season tournament, but had already beat them before that, and beat them on nights when Giannis was spectacular. I mean, the only time they lost was when Giannis scored 64 points. I mean, they beat him on a night when he had 54. Which was amazing. They did not have an answer for him, but all the same, they were able to beat them in spite of him. And then obviously he missed the playoffs, which made a difference. Certainly they were fortunate enough to avoid him. And so you still. Damian Lillard pointed out when the season ended, when the Pacers, eliminated them, that, hey, man, I didn't get a camp with these guys. You got to remember that trade happened right before the season started. And so, they had a coaching change midseason to go from Adrian Griffin to Doc Rivers, and so we'll see how that group changes. But they certainly have an opportunity, I think, to be an Eastern Conference contender. Certainly the Knicks do, having added Mikal Bridges, the 76ers do, having added Paul George, and certainly the Celtics, have every reason to believe that they can repeat, and win not just the East but the entire title. So East is going to be something. I think. I mean, just that they're certainly. It's certainly a top-heavy team in the sense, top-heavy league in the sense of, I think there are the 8 playoff teams, I think, are definitively better than everybody else. But in the league, but I think each of those eight playoff teams you have to view as a contender. Certainly Philly was the 7 last season. I think you have reason to believe that they could, finish, they could win the East. They could be in the top 2. Certainly having Paul George, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey together, that's a potent big 3. Again, the Knicks adding Bridges to already having Brunson, re-signing Anunoby. Let me think. Still having DiVincenzo. Still having Miles McBride, some of those guys. Josh Hart. They've got some real players in that team. But the Pacers belong. The Magic adding Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They're a little bit of an older. They're maturing a little bit. I was really impressed by some of their guys. Franz Wagner obviously had a really good FIBA. An Olympic tournament. That Orlando team is tough. I think Cleveland is going to have a new coach, but I think they still have a couple of good players. Donovan Mitchell certainly leading that group. I think he's as good as guard as there is in the East. So it is going to be a dogfight to get back. It's not going to be easy for the Pacers to get back to where they were last year, but I think they belong as part of that group.
Mid-November, the Pacers will host the Heat and Kel'el Ware, former Hoosier, for the group stage of the NBA Cup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that'll be interesting to see just kind of where he shakes out. Obviously, Bam Adebayo is their starting center, and Bam had a really productive Olympics. Bam is still the guy, and got a big extension this summer, got well paid. So Kel'el Ware is not going to come in there and take Bam Adebayo's job, but Kel'el Ware is going to play. I think he probably had among the best, performances in, NBA Summer League, just of anybody in that event. He was one of the best guys. So I think he showed himself showed out well, made a good case for being the type of guy who gets to be an understudy and gets to be a good second unit center, and get opportunities that way. And your second unit matters, especially during the regular season. Basically, that's what gets you, in places. Obviously, the Pacers, that was one of the most important things they had, is the highest scoring bench in the NBA, and that's a big reason why they got to where they got to. It's a big reason why they ended up with where they did in the playoffs, because that bench really produced. TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin, I think, were 1-2 in total points in the bench, off the bench in the playoffs. And so I think that was certainly really important for those guys. And it matters. Basically, it really matters. Even if you're only playing 15 minutes a game, those 15 minutes matter. You don't want to have a big drop off. You don't want to be the type of team that puts in second unit and fades. And so Ware, I think, has the opportunity to be a really important player for the Heat as a second unit guy.
And not only that, Bam Adebayo, a great person to learn from. He, like you said, he has played outstanding, and Kel'el Ware had a great summer in the Summer League and showed his talent. So what a great spot for him to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Bam does things that not a lot of people, I would say not a lot of people do, but one of the most important things that you could do as a center at this point defensively is being able to be a good switcher, be really good at switching on ball screens, be really good at being able to contain a point guard when you come off, basically, when you get screened, when your guy screens, when your 5-man screens a point guard's defender, and you can switch basically in that case and be able to still keep that point guard from getting by you. Bam Adebayo is as good as there is in the league at that. And so if you're Kel'el Ware, that's the type of thing you need to learn. You need to have somebody to really get across to you just the importance of that, and what it requires just from a technical standpoint, from a footwork standpoint. So that's really big. I mean, where Shrugby is okay at that, Obviously, I certainly didn't watch that part of his game extremely closely, but it's, it is mission critical in the NBA at this point when you get drafted into the league to be the sort of guy that can contain a point guard getting downhill. So that I think is going to be really good. Again, just all those little things that a guy like that can do. Certainly, he's a guy that's led teams to, taking the Heat, helped take the Heat to the finals twice. Obviously, Jimmy Butler is a big piece of that, but Bam was major in both cases, getting them to where they got in the 2020 in the bubble season, and then 2023 last year. In both cases, surprising a lot of teams by taking the Heat to the finals, and a lot of that I think had to do with what Adebayo did as a defender, both as a rim protector and as a ball screen switch guy.
What can fans expect difference in the Pacers? I mean, it's such a great game last year. You're making it to the conference finals. So a little bit of pressure on them now because that was kind of unexpected. So now it becomes the expected.
Sure. No, I mean, I don't think that there's necessarily a get back to the Eastern Conference Finals and we're firing everybody sort of deal. Obviously, a lot of people got paid. Or are set up to get paid, basically. And that's kind of a big piece to it, that like there is the money factor. I think that they have, a lot of guys got rewarded. The issue on that is, that then you have a much more highly paid team, and, everybody individually, there's a lot of, are you living up to the contract that you got? Tyrese Haliburton's contract kicks in. Pascal Siakam got a 4-year max deal. Obviously he's a guy that's proven, but it's a question of, okay, was it worth it for his age? That he's 30. And so it's like, okay, are you going to get the max benefit from that? Obi Toppin got a 4-year, $60 million deal. Andrew Nembhard got a 3-year, $59 million deal that kicks in next year. It's going to be a lot tighter, and so, there is going to be an expectation. They're going to have a standard they're going to have to hold themselves to. They're not the team that's going to come in and surprise anybody anymore. Everybody's going to expect them. Everybody wants to beat them. Even the teams that are technically expected to, I think the Knicks and the Bucks are probably still going to be expected to finish higher than them, even though the Pacers beat them in the playoffs. The Knicks and the Bucks carry chips on their shoulders on that basis. Absolutely, some of the best teams in the league want to get these guys and want to get them bad. Certainly, and the Pacers make noise, and I mean, on a physical, literal sense, they talk. And so there are teams that are going to want to beat them for that reason. So that is going to change things. There are going to be some teams that want to wipe the smile off the Pacers' faces. So that's going to be different. And there is going to be some level of, there is going to be some level of pressure. I think it, again, I don't think there's certainly not a must win this season, or, it's all going to fall apart situation, but their window begins. You can start using the term window now, because of these contracts, because you could say, okay, you've got 4 years with Pascal Siakam. You've obviously dedicated enough money to him to believe that he's your guy with Tyrese Haliburton. Obviously Haliburton can be around for a lot longer, but you've got, Miles Turner's got 1 more year on his contract. And so it's like this group, you don't know what they're going to do with Turner, because they're getting tight as far as, they're well above the cap now. They're close to the luxury tax. And so if you start re-signing people at more and bigger contracts, you're starting getting into aprons that take away your flexibility. I mean, there becomes more limitations to you on what you can do with trades. So it's basically, they've established mostly who their group is going to be, and I think that that makes a difference. I think that changes the way your team gets looked at, the way you look at yourselves. You have to realize, like, there's not a lot of further cavalry coming in. This is your group. This is the team that you've got to win with. And if it doesn't go the way it's supposed to go early on, that can create some kind of tension and some kind of concerns. And you have to battle through that. I mean, obviously, if you have a bad November, that doesn't mean that you're not going to make it. And you got to, be able to rely on certain things. Certainly they had, not great stretches last year. They didn't have long, bad stretches last year. I think their longest losing streak was maybe 4 or 5 games, somewhere in that range. They didn't have a lot of it. Brian says, I don't know the defense will be any better. They don't have better players, better defensive players than they had last year. I think what could they could get better statistically on the basis of they kind of know who their group is. You got to remember last year, they got Bruce Brown. They didn't have Siakam. Starting lineup was different. Defensively, they functioned different. They had Nembhard and Nesmith coming off the bench. They certainly decided those were their two best defensive players. I don't think Brown was as much of a lockdown guy as they hoped he was going to be. He was certainly a good defender. I don't know if he came off as a great defender. So we'll see how that goes. But having, they go in presuming, unless things change drastically, probably have the same starting five, probably have the same scenario with Nembhard and, Haliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, Siakam, Turner is probably going to be your starting five. Mathurin obviously has a chance to play his way into that, but I think otherwise they really like how those units work. And so, again, we'll see how that goes, but that at least says, all right, you're going to start the year with your best two defenders, your best two perimeter defenders in that lineup. Obviously, you have your best shot blocker in there already. I think Siakam is a good team defender. Or can be a good team defender, and that can make them a lot better as the season goes. Certainly, I think he had to get used to the way they played defense. He's mentioned this, that he had to get used to the style of defense that they played with the Pacers versus what they play with Toronto. It's sort of just different focuses. The Pacers were very intentional in terms of the shots they were willing to give up last year, even though, their defense as a whole wasn't very good, but their plan basically was to take away open threes, and they didn't want to allow a lot of shots in the paint. They still did, but basically the way they played, pick and roll, they were mostly 2-on-2. They didn't do a lot of tagging off, and there were shots that they basically allowed. They were trying to get you to take a long two, was sort of the point. And if you hit it, you hit it. And they would live with that. But they gave up, I think, the fewest threes in the league. So my point in saying that is that, Siakam was just figuring that out, basically only played half a season. So he's going to, I think, have a better sense of how he fits as a team defender, which matters, I think, because he's a really good help side guy, because he can run at you with all that kind of length. I think he makes a difference. So you have those pieces together. Obviously, as Brian also mentioned in the comments there, Tyrese Haliburton is not the best on-ball defender in the world. He's a good off-ball defender. He's very good at getting into passing lanes, getting his hands on balls, and getting steals. He's not very good at locking a guy up when he's driving at him. And so he obviously has a couple some time to get some physical development done before he gets to camp. There's still about 5 weeks left before they get into preseason camp. So he's got some time to get himself in the weight room. Did not see a lot of great defense from him in the Olympics. And he's right. Brian's right in saying that the reason he get on the floor is because he's not a great defender. And the other backup point guard was, option B there was Derek White. Derek White is one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, second team all defense along with Drew Holiday. So they had Holiday and White together. Sometimes or separate, basically that those two guys were taking a lot of minutes that Haliburton could have had. And, again, they got those minutes because they're, two of the best defenders in the league. And that's why the Celtics are champions and Pacers aren't. So there is that issue, obviously. But I do think there are ways they're going to be a better defensive team. Are they going to be a great defensive team? No. They're sort of still looking at it as they're a great offensive team. If they can just get into the 20s as far as where they rank defensively, that can go a long way. And so can they get there? Probably, maybe. We'll see. But are they, I don't expect them to be a top 10 defense in terms of efficiency or in terms of scoring defense or any major category. But I think they can be a top 20 defense, and that can make them good enough if they can still score at the level that they were. That's good enough to keep them in that. It basically to keep them as a contender. Does that put them in the Celtics realm? Well, no. Does it make it competitive with them in a 7-game series? Probably. Are they going to win 60 games like Boston did? Probably not.
And we mentioned Tyrese. He's the star of this team, and
sure,
even though he got Pascal Siakam, who is just as important. But he has to, and I'm talking about who I was just talking about. I'm drawing a blank already.
We're talking about Haliburton. We're talking about Siakam.
Haliburton. He knows he has to get better at defense.
Sure.
That he has to be better. The whole team knows this. So this is up to the team to make these differences because as you've stated, their team is on the floor. So
pretty much.
they have to go out and all improve on that to make that team better.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in Haliburton, and to me, in Haliburton's case, it's physical. I mean, I think I say this all the time. He is one of the smartest basketball minds you'll ever meet. Like, you have a conversation with Tyrese, like, he gets the game at a level that not many people on earth do. And so he knows what his problem is. I mean, frankly, he laid it out for me. Like, I asked him, going into the 2023 offseason, what do you think, where do you have to get better on ball and off ball defensively? He said, man, I'm elite off ball. I know where the ball is going to go. And so I can get steals that way. Like, I know what every team is going to do. He's like, my problem is I got pushed around, like, Tyrese has been skinny his whole life. Like, Tyrese has never been a huge weight room fan. And Tyrese has been skinny his whole life. And there's a reason why. I was little growing up. So, and I'm not big now, but like, I get, like, I look at Tyrese and you see, you see like stuff that you remember if you were a skinny kid. He is skinny. Like, he is. I mean, like, you looked at him standing next to LeBron James, and you're like, those guys are on the same Olympic team. Like, how is that possible? But I mean, like, he's a wizard. He is a genius. He and Rick Carlisle uses the term, he's an artist. I mean, what he does with a basketball, how he sees the pieces move on a basketball court is incredible. He has an absolute gift for that. But physically, he is not a big, bulky guy, and you need some muscle to play good on-ball defense in this league. You've got to make sure that someone can't push you back, that someone can't drive at you. And Tyrese got straight pushed around a couple times when he was on the floor defensively, and so that's got to be a focus. And it might not be enough, one off season, and because he's played for FIBA, played for Team USA the last 2 summers, that's changed up his development. He's focused on those things. And I would, and again, this is me saying, I would have done what he did a million times over. This experience you don't get to get. Like, I mean, even just being on the bench for this team, like, that's once in a lifetime. Like, if you're Tyrese Haliburton, you'd never pass that up in 1,000 years. But was there a cost? Yeah. Like, that's time you can't spend in the weight room. That's time you got to be ready to play. You can't be out there maxing out on your bench when there's a chance you might have to shoot later. Like, you have to lift weights, you have to do something to maintain, but you're not bulking up. Like, your weight training is different when you're playing games than when you're not. Like, there's a maintenance factor versus a building muscle factor, and it's different because you're not trying to mess up your shot. You're trying not, like, when you get into an off season, you can do that. It doesn't matter if how good of a shooter you are in the middle, in late July, but it does when you're playing in the Olympics. So, I mean, there's got to be physical transformation for him to get to be a better defensive player. And it might not be, he might not have enough time this summer to make that happen. For him to be a great defensive player, he's going to have to get physically bigger, stronger, more physical. And that's probably going to take a couple years.